Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I want to do a video recommending some diverse crime fiction, including thrillers and mysteries. It's definitely one of the least diverse genres if you're just looking at the bestsellers list, so I want to compile some of my favorites that are diverse in one way or another. So if you are looking to expand your reading, hopefully this will give you some ideas. All that being said, let's get into the books. First, I want to start by recommending a book by Jennifer Hillier, and honestly I could go with several of them because they all either have an Asian protagonist or a biracial protagonist, but the one I want to talk about here is The Butcher. This is about a serial killer who was prolific years ago in Seattle, who went around killing women and would actually cut off their hand, which is how he got that nickname. And at the time, they believed that they caught and killed the man, and the police officer responsible for that was decorated and went on to have a fantastic career. He is now retired, and his grandson is actually dating a woman who believes that her mother was killed by the butcher and her murder was just never linked to that man. And so she's going around investigating into the case, and you learn very early on that perhaps that man, that police officer, didn't actually kill the right man, and maybe the serial killer is still at large. I love this book so much. It's incredibly fun, and the reason I want to recommend it here is that it is an own voices story because in this case Hillier writes about Filipino characters, which is her own background. She's Canadian born, lives in the States, but she is of Filipino descent, and the grandson that the woman is dating actually runs a restaurant where he cooks his traditional Filipino food. So I really liked that element in the story, and I definitely thought it was interesting. I learned a lot about some delicious food that I didn't know much about otherwise. So if you're looking for a diverse thriller, that is my first recommendation and one of my favorites. Next, I want to recommend another favorite, and that is Perfect Days by Raphael Montes. This is about a sociopathic medical student who falls for a young woman and tries to pick her up, but she turns him down. Rather than letting it go, he decides to kidnap her, and things transpire from there. She is an aspiring writer, and he decides to take her on a road trip so that she can get inspiration to finish her play. This book has often been compared to Misery, and while it has threads of that, it's certainly its own story. And arguably, I would say Stephen King is not the most diverse writer, so if you're looking for a similar story but from a more diverse perspective, this is a great one to pick up. The main character is very deadpan. He's very much a sociopath lacking emotions. So if you're looking for this like fun, kooky character, you might need to look elsewhere. If you just want to see this deadpan, emotionless guy doing his thing, being a creep, this one is a lot of fun to read. The diversity comes from the fact that this book is set in Brazil, which is where the author is from and writes from. This book actually is translated, so it was originally written in Portuguese and is being translated to English. And I like the fact that it's a road trip around Brazil, so you get to see a lot of the countryside, and it's definitely one of my favorite diverse reads as well. Now, switching it up to talk about sexual diversity, I want to recommend a mystery, and that is The Last Place You Look by Kristen Lepionka. And this is a book about a woman who is a private investigator. She has the classic troubles of a woman working in that field. She drinks a lot, she sleeps around, and she gets contacted by a woman whose brother is on death row for the murder of his girlfriend as well as her family. Years ago, he was convicted of their deaths. However, she believes that his girlfriend is actually alive. She saw someone who looked like his girlfriend walking around and has hired the private investigator to track her down to prove that she wasn't actually murdered and hopefully find out what actually happened to that woman's family. I really enjoyed the setup to the mystery. It just kind of reminded me of Serial, the podcast, which is always a good thing. And the biggest reason I want to recommend it here is the fact that the main woman, the private investigator, is bisexual, and that is discussed on the page. She has relationships with both men and women. As I mentioned, she does sleep around a lot, so it's not representation of a bisexual woman in a committed relationship, but someone who is loosely dating other people. But I personally am always looking for bisexual representation in my books, regardless of genre, because I find it the hardest one of the gay, lesbian, bisexual trio to read because I find the other ones are a lot more plentiful. So if you have any recommendations for bisexual stories, I would love to get them down below. This is my personal recommendation and is just a really good sexually diverse story to read. And for a different kind of diversity, I also want to recommend Not a Sound by Heather Gudenkauf. And this is about a nurse who a couple years ago got into a terrible accident that caused her to lose her hearing. And now she has to deal with that aftermath and make adjustments in her life to accommodate being deaf. The story starts out when she's going for a walk and comes across a woman who has been brutally murdered. It turns out that the woman that she found is actually a nurse that she knew before and an old friend. And so she personally becomes invested in the murder investigation. And even though she is a civilian, she decides to try to track down and figure out what happened for herself. I really enjoy the mystery in this one. It's a case where the author did a good job of having enough suspects that I really didn't know who did it until later in the book when I started to hone in on the right suspect. But she definitely made me shift around my suspicions, and the mystery itself was very enjoyable. But even beyond that, what I loved so much about this book was that deaf representation, because it's not a community I actually knew a lot about, and the author was able to show different things that the character would run into, from how to answer a phone to different things involving lip reading that I was unaware of. And so I learned so much about the deaf community through this book, and I found that all absolutely fascinating. So if you're looking for a book that is not only a good mystery but will teach you a lot about a group of people that you may not know a lot about before going into, which is honestly the whole reason to read diversely, then I definitely recommend this one. I listened to it as an audiobook, which had fantastic narration, and if you have a chance to check it out in any form, I definitely recommend this. This is one of my favorite mysteries. And finally, I want to recommend My Sister, the Serial Killer by Oyinkan Braithwaite. And this is a book that is set in Nigeria that is about two sisters. One is a serial killer, as the title suggests, and her sister then goes about helping her when she gets herself in trouble and basically goes around cleaning up her mess. So the story is told from the sister of the serial killer, and she, like I said, basically goes around trying to prevent her sister from killing more people. It's a very literary novel, so it's very quiet and introspective. It's very short as well. There isn't a lot of surprise to it because you know from the first page who the serial killer is and what is happening. You're given all the information, and instead it's very much a story of characters and getting to see how such a strange relationship would transpire. So if you enjoy just a really weird, quirky story, this is a good one to pick up. And the Nigerian background to the story was excellent. It is own voices, and I definitely learned a lot about a country that I otherwise haven't really had much reason to explore. So I really enjoyed that representation. So that's it for this video. I would love to know down below if you plan to pick up any of the books I recommended here. As well, I'd love for you to recommend me your favorite diverse crime fiction stories, whether they be thrillers, mysteries, suspense, etc. Because this list is by no means complete. And honestly, I am always looking for more diversity in this genre because I do find it really hard to find these titles, especially really good ones. So if you do have recommendations, leave a comment, and please like, share, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already if you'd like to see more videos like this. Thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.